Eek! When I opened the 0 degrees Fahrenheit freezer, inside was my 6-month-old daughter, who I thought I had left with my husband. I hurriedly picked her up and put my hand to her cheek. Her face was cold, and I couldn't hear her crying. Faced with my child, I collapsed on the spot. How did this happen? When I contacted my husband, he answered in a carefree voice, "Our daughter is still doing fine." Liar. I decided to investigate him for deceiving me and doing this to our daughter. Then, something unbelievable came to light. I was so angry I could feel my blood boil, and I decided to send my husband to hell. I met my husband Charles when he was the owner of a pub and I was a customer. It was near the publishing company where I worked, and I often went there with my colleagues. He was always working hard there, and before I knew it, I found myself watching him. Fate brought us together, and we started dating. We got married when I was 34 and started our new life together. Soon after we started living together, I found out I was pregnant. Really? Yay! I'm finally going to be a dad. Charles was overjoyed, almost jumping up and down. Every time we went for a checkup, I would show Charles the ultrasound pictures we got from the hospital, and we looked forward to the day we would meet our child. I worked right up until just before giving birth, and then safely delivered our daughter, Charlotte. As first-time parents, we didn't know left from right, and spent our days poring over parenting books. Still, life with my gentle husband and our adorable child was pure happiness. However, after the baby was born, Charles became busier with work, and I ended up doing most of the housework and childcare. I thought it couldn't be helped, but I was worried about his health. "You're not getting much sleep, are you?" Well, I'm managing somehow." Around this time, there were plans to open a new branch of the pub, and my husband would go out almost every day saying he had meetings, coming home late at night. Moreover, he said he was developing new menu items for the pub, so after closing the store, he would take employees to visit other establishments for research. In the mornings, he would sleep until the last minute, so he hardly spent any time with Charlotte. "Honey, won't you come with me tomorrow to buy some children's clothes?" "I can't. I'm tired too." "At least let me sleep on my days off from work." My husband was in a bad mood, probably because he was busy and tired. Just Charlotte waking up and fussing in the middle of the night would set him off. Shut up. Make her stop crying. Not only that, but in his anger, he would throw whatever was nearby at us. "Charlotte's still a baby. It can't be helped." I would retort, but he wouldn't listen. "That's enough. I'm going to sleep at the store." Finally, he would say that and leave the house. Maybe when things settle down with the new store, his mood will change. I told myself that and decided to be patient. However, the situation didn't change, and 3 months passed. That's when I got a call from my best friend. She was getting married and wanted me to attend. I told her it might be difficult, but she said, "We'd really like you to give a speech too, so please come." I thought it would be impossible to leave Charlotte with Charles, and my parents lived too far away to ask them to come all that way. Charles's parents lived nearby, but they were elderly, so I felt uncomfortable asking them to take care of the baby. I wanted to see my friend in her wedding dress and celebrate with her, but I was thinking I'd have to regretfully decline when my husband came by and glanced at what I was holding. Your friend's wedding? Yes, it's in 3 months, but with Charlotte here, I was thinking of declining the invitation. He said, and went back to looking at his phone. But a few minutes later, he came back to me and said, "You should go." What? I mean the wedding. I'll take a day off work and look after Charlotte, so you should go. I was so surprised by Charles's unexpected offer that I couldn't respond right away. Are you sure? It's a bit far, so I won't be able to come back quickly if something happens. It's fine. You should take a break once in a while. Thank you. To be honest, I was worried about whether my husband, who had hardly been involved in childcare since our daughter was born, could take care of her alone for a few days. However, I didn't want to dampen his enthusiasm, so I swallowed those words and decided to ask him. Over the next 3 months, I took every opportunity to teach Charles about childcare little by little. And on the day I left for my friend's wedding, well, I'm counting on you. Leave it to me. You go and have fun. I left my daughter with my husband and set out as planned. However, when I arrived at the airport, there was an announcement that the flight had been cancelled due to sudden bad weather. I contacted my friend to let her know about the sudden cancellation and apologized. I thought I'd head back home and tried to tell my husband, but the phone wouldn't connect. Maybe he's too busy taking care of Charlotte to answer. Imagining that scene made me feel a bit happy. Thinking he probably wouldn't have time to read an email anyway, I just went straight home. Soaking wet from the pouring rain, I returned home to find no sign of my husband or daughter in the living room or bedroom. I couldn't imagine them going out in this bad weather. It just happened to be the day off from my husband's pub, so I thought there was no way anyone would be there, but I decided to head to the store just in case. The pub was silent, with no sign of anyone, but the light was on in the food storage room where the freezers are kept. Did they forget to turn it off? I stepped into the room and noticed that one of the freezers was slightly open, with cold air leaking out. Worried that the food inside might be spoiling, I decided to check. And when I opened the door, what I saw was my daughter, placed in a basket inside the 0 degrees Fahrenheit freezer. I immediately took her out and held her. "Charlotte, hang in there." My daughter's face was cold, and she wasn't crying. I collapsed in despair. But then I realized I needed to take her to the hospital, so I called an ambulance. As I watched Charlotte being taken to the emergency room, I prayed she would be okay. How did this happen? Where on earth did Charles go? I called my husband many times, but no matter how many times I called, it just kept ringing without connecting. I decided to try emailing him to ask about Charlotte's condition. After a while, I received a message saying, "Charlotte is playing happily. Enjoy the wedding." At this point, I had already taken her to the hospital. Liar. I felt my blood boil with anger towards Charles. At this moment, I decided to get thorough revenge on my husband, and I sent an email to a certain place. Then, to punish him, I set my plan in motion. 3 days later, my husband came home. Charles went straight to his workplace, the pub, not home. I was watching his behavior from home through a baby monitor camera I had installed in the store. He went straight to the room where the freezer was kept. Through the camera, my husband looked somewhat frantic. Charles's scream could be heard all the way outside the pub. I entered the store and quietly stood behind my husband. He seemed to be muttering to himself. "Why are you screaming so loudly? I can hear you all the way outside." When I spoke up, Charles's body jerked, and he turned around. Seeing me, he started to panic, saying, Why? You'll scare Charlotte if you yell like that. I'm home. Was she a good girl?" I called out, seeing our daughter's clothes behind him. When I tried to peek at Charlotte's face, Charles used his whole body to block me. "Can you move? I want to hold her." "No, she's sleeping now, so it's better not to." "Then at least let me see her sleeping face." "Ah!" When I screamed, my husband looked embarrassed and immediately averted his eyes from me. "What's going on? Where's Charlotte?" "Well, that's..." My husband was flustered as I pressed him with questions. And for good reason. Instead of my daughter, who should have been in the basket in the freezer, there was a baby doll dressed in Charlotte's clothes. Of course, this was my doing, and everything up to this point had been an act. "This is just Charlotte's toy." "Oh, is that so? Then where is Charlotte?" That's right, I've left her with someone for a bit." My husband tried to cover up the situation by piling on more lies. Then, as if he realized something, he looked at me with a shocked expression. "Wait, why are you here? Weren't you supposed to come back in the evening? Is there some reason why it's a problem for me to come back early?" "No, that's not what I mean. Actually, when I decided to punish Charles, I had sent him an email. It said I would continue to rely on him to take care of our daughter and that I wouldn't be back until the evening 3 days later. That email was a lie. The plane couldn't fly that day because of bad weather, so I came right back home." I didn't hear about that. Why didn't you contact me right away?" "I did, but you didn't answer." "Even if you say that, there are times when I can't answer the phone." Charles, who had been so confident until then, was becoming more and more timid, and towards the end, he was mumbling so softly I could barely hear him. However, not answering the phone then wasn't the issue anymore. I'm not angry about such trivial matters. You're lying about leaving Charlotte with someone, aren't you? Because when I came back, you weren't home, and she was in that freezer. You knew. And you pulled this creepy prank with a doll. That's the worst. My husband approached me, bristling with anger. But I pushed him back, not backing down. Who's the worst here? When I emailed you to ask about Charlotte's condition, you said she was playing happily, didn't you? By then, I had already taken her to the hospital. Liar. What on earth were you doing? I was in tears as I confronted Charles, remembering the state of our daughter at that time. However, He avoided eye contact with me and remained silent. "Say something," I said, thrusting a piece of paper at my husband. "You went here, didn't you?" It was a travel itinerary. That's... I suddenly had a meeting about the new branch. Oh, really? The booking completion date is from 3 months ago. Looking at the date, it was booked right after I decided to attend my friend's wedding. Charles, seeming to realize he was in trouble, avoided my gaze and kept quiet. Moreover, it's booked as a couple's plan. Ha! I wasn't invited though. Well, I saw it on TV, and they said it was a popular plan, so I thought I might learn something for our store. My husband made a desperate excuse, but it only made him seem more suspicious. Sweat was slowly forming on his forehead. "Oh. So you took your employees with you for work?" "Yes, it was like a company trip." I was inwardly exasperated by Charles's constantly changing story. But this was just the beginning. I didn't have time to drag out this back and forth forever. "How is this training?" I held out several photos in front of him. They showed my husband posing happily with a woman at tourist spots, or close together, clearly a couple's trip, not coworkers. My husband took out his smartphone and looked back and forth between the photos I presented and his screen, seeming flustered. "Why do you have those photos?" He showed me his phone screen. The same photos I had printed were displayed there. I looked at my husband with a smirk. "Did you forget that I can see the contents of your phone from the computer?" "Ah." He covered his mouth as if remembering something. Actually, some time ago, he had asked me to create some mailings for the store's customers on the computer. However, all the address data was saved on Charles's smartphone, so he had synced his phone with the computer himself. That's why I could immediately see the reservation he made on his phone, and I could also check the photos his affair partner had sent him. "And this is an employee at your store, right? No wonder you could confidently call it a company trip." The affair partner was a 28-year-old woman named Taylor who worked at my husband's store. "I'm honestly quite shocked to find out you were having an affair right under my nose." Even when I said this, he showed no signs of remorse. I no longer had any lingering affection for such a man. More than you being attracted to another woman, what I absolutely can't forgive is what you did to Charlotte. Well, since it's all out in the open now, I guess there's no helping it. Charles gave up trying to hide it and smiled defiantly. "I wanted to be with Taylor, so I was planning to divorce you." Well, I figured I'd have to pay alimony, but paying child support for Charlotte was a bit. It seems my husband didn't want to make the unnecessary expense of child support. When he saw me worrying about going to my friend's wedding, he had an idea. He thought if he got rid of the daughter I left with him, there would be no problem. And on that day, Charles locked Charlotte in the freezer and left for his affair trip. He was planning to dispose of our daughter before I returned and come up with some reason to tell me she had died. Well, thanks to you, my whole plan was ruined. Looking at my husband grinning as he spoke, I felt nothing but disgust. "So, where's Charlotte? When's the funeral?" "Ha! What are you talking about?" I'm asking what happened to her, damn it. Charles asked me in an irritated tone. Charlotte is fine. She's in the hospital now, with my mother looking after her. What? That brat is alive. My husband showed obvious disappointment. It seems I discovered our daughter right after Charles had left. Indeed, Charlotte's face was cold, and she wasn't crying, so I had feared the worst. However, while waiting for the ambulance I had called, our daughter opened her eyes, yawned, and cried loudly. It seems Charlotte had just been sleeping soundly even in that situation. We had her thoroughly examined at the hospital, but there were no abnormalities. However, considering she was only 6 months old, she was kept in the hospital for a slightly longer stay. The freezer door being slightly open, and the fact that not much time had passed before I discovered her, several lucky factors came together to save Charlotte. I can say this now because she's okay, but I was amazed at Charlotte's toughness, able to sleep soundly anywhere. I'm reporting this incident to the police. Why? If Charlotte is okay, isn't that fine? Hearing the word police, he opened his eyes wide and looked panicked. That's not the point. What you did could have easily taken our child's life. Damn it. Why didn't the plane fly? If you had gone to the wedding, my plan would have been perfect. My husband, completely unrepentant, paced around me, spitting as he spoke. It seems he had no recognition that he had done anything wrong. To make him acknowledge his crime, I decided to ask the police to give him a severe punishment, but I also decided to teach him a lesson in another way. I'm going to write about this incident in the information magazine. The reputation of this store will plummet. Wait a minute. That's not fair. It's an abuse of authority. Charles stopped in his tracks and grabbed my shoulder. However, I shook off his hand with all my might. I'm just doing my job. You might have forgotten, but I worked at a publishing company and was in charge of an information magazine. Actually, before we got married, when I used to frequent my husband's store, it wasn't very popular. So I wrote an article recommending it as a hidden gem pub, and it quickly became a thriving establishment. That's how he came to appreciate me, which led to us dating and eventually marrying. But my husband knows the impact of being featured in an information magazine, so he looked quite flustered. After coming this far, with plans for a new branch. If an article like that is written, sales will plummet, and we'll lose all credibility. That's not my problem. But if that happens, we'll struggle financially. You and Charlotte will suffer too, you know. He was desperately trying to persuade me. Oh. But weren't you planning to divorce me because you wanted to be with your affair partner? In that case, what happens to us shouldn't matter to you. That's, I've already prepared the papers. Hurry up and sign here. I'll be sure to claim both alimony and child support. I waved the divorce papers I had prepared in front of my husband. He snatched them from me and stared at them intently. Finally seeming to grasp the reality of the situation, Charles suddenly got down on his knees and began to beg. Please forgive me. I'll apologize, so please reconsider the divorce. Can't you keep quiet about this to the police? Watching my husband cling to me in tears, I could only see him as a pitiful person now. If an apology was enough, we wouldn't need the police. You should live with regret for what you've done. When I coldly pushed him away, Charles collapsed on the floor, wailing. After that, my husband and I finalized our divorce. I demanded a total of $30,000 in damages for the affair from him and his mistress. And I had him pay $100,000 in child support for our daughter in a lump sum. This incident, which my husband caused because he didn't want to pay unnecessary money, ended up costing him dearly. Charles, who was reported to the police and questioned about the incident, was subsequently arrested and sentenced to spend some time behind bars. Even without me writing an article about it, the incident was picked up by the news and prominently featured in newspapers. Furthermore, the website where he had been promoting his pub's information was flooded with critical comments about him putting our daughter in the freezer. The pub's reputation plummeted, and it quickly went out of business. When my husband gets out, he'll have nowhere to go back to. Meanwhile, I've started a new life with just my daughter and me. To be honest, since Charles was never involved in childcare anyway, there's no real impact. Charlotte is growing up healthy and strong. From now on, I want to keep working hard for my daughter's smile.